Hey guys, welcome. Hat Tuesday number 10. Hat Tuesday number 10. Wow. We're already in double digits. You see that? We're already in double digits. Man, I don't know if anybody here caught that show yesterday. I did. If you did, thank you. There was kind of like, I guess, a little bit of limited participation. I have no idea if that was you guys being a little bit more reverential. I don't know. It was really good. It was a lot of fun. Hey, Josh, I knew you were there. Good morning. Uh, yeah, I was just talking about the show yesterday with my brother. Shout out to all you guys that tuned in. It wasn't hat related, right? It was movie related. So it's something that could have fit into Fedora Friday. But Fedora Friday is kind of about hats. And I kind of teased the idea of the fact that, well, at some point we're going to run out of hat movies. And let's be honest, there's a lot of great movies out there that don't really feature hats. So the nice thing is, it seems like I got a perfect forum now, right? I got the Pyramid Stream series. I don't know how many of those are going to come up in the near future. For right now, it's going to be a forum that I will use for those kind of movies, and essentially, you know, who else? Who knows what else will go into that? I got a lot of really great feedback, particularly from my family. I think part of the downside of kind of being spread out, right, is that we don't see each other that often, right? And also the fact is, we have kind of very blended families, right? If you guys paid attention to some of that talk, Sammy and I, we have the same dad, we don't share the same mom, but we're so similar. And I gotta think that's partly to do with my dad, right, in terms of the gene pool. But at the same time, there's like that universality, right? You guys know that I tend to kind of view a lot of the similarities, right? I tend to focus on what's similar, right? If it's interesting to point out, I'll point out differences, right? But I tend to focus on similarities, right? Because, like I mentioned on the stream, right? The idea is, you want to try to see yourself in other people, right? And sometimes you have to kind of point that out. Some people know right away, right? And sometimes you just have to kind of, and you still state the obvious, but other times you want to point it out because sometimes it doesn't become really apparent. It's like, wow, I never, I mentioned that sometimes because I've heard it in conversations. Wow, I didn't think of this like that, but interesting, and you kind of, it gets the wheels turning and the conversation going. And that's how you create, like I said, I don't care if everybody shares my same opinions, right? I'm an expert in my own opinions, right? And I don't pretend that they are anything more than just opinions, right? Sometimes I'll state things and it sounds like it's something I'm speaking fact. And if I'm present enough in my mind, I'll point out, hey, this is just an opinion, or this is information I got from Chat GPT, yada, yada, yada. Only because I feel like it's my responsibility to you guys to point that out. And I don't always do it. Sometimes those things are like, all right, I think it's a fact. Doesn't mean it is. You guys can go point that out, and I'm okay with that. Like I said, I'm interested in hearing your opinions, right? And obviously, I mentioned this before. I haven't mentioned it lately, but I try to avoid politics, right? I know we have a swath of political opinions, but in my view, I don't really care about like your politics, right? Not that I don't care, right? Because if you feel strongly about it, that's interesting. That's part of you, but it doesn't color my opinion of you as a person, right? You just have your own political beliefs, right? And they're very staunch, and I'm not trying to change them. I never would, right? And I just feel like there's only open area to be divisive when you talk about politics, and that's why I avoid it. You know what I mean? Like even within my own family, I try to avoid it, even though my family, can get pretty heated, I guess, about that. And that's another reason why I'm like, wow, if you can divide a family, right? And again, not that we hate each other or anything like that, that far from it. We love each other. And the fact that we're so comfortable with each other, sometimes we're comfortable, expressing our political views. But at the same time, I don't like to see the banter back and forth. Trust me, I get it. You know what I mean? But it's just that thing of like people convinced that you're going to say that one thing, right? I don't know if they are convinced, but it seems like that. Like they're trying to convince the other person to go their way. And it's just not going to happen. That's not how political views, happen, right? Like people are changed, right? We talked about Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett was somebody that at some point transitioned from identifying himself as a Republican, which his dad was, right? His dad was his idol. Lots to respect about that for Warren Buffett. And but his dad was a Republican politician, and the household, and including Warren, grew up identifying as Republican. However, once Warren got out there and saw the world, married his first wife, and I think that transformation happened for him. And again, I'm sure it happens the other way, right? If somebody goes and identifies as Democrat, right, and then becomes more Republican. I see that transition happen a lot more often, at least in my personal experience, because, well, folks in the Northeast, where I come from, a lot of them are Democrats, right? You have the blue states up there in New York, New Jersey, right? Pennsylvania is kind of a swing state, right? But as you go south, right, as I did, right, I started interacting with a lot more Republicans, and you start getting a more of a nuanced view, right? It's not black and white anymore. And that happened to people that I know, right? That I've known in the Northeast. They move up further south, and now all of a sudden the politics change, and that's fine. Again, nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with not being stagnant. So yeah, basically, I see Robert's in the Facebook comments. I'm just gonna close out the Facebook only because, well, I get distracted very easily. Sorry, Robert. I will catch your message later on, I'm sure. And that gets me to, I guess, the major point of today's show, right? You didn't see a topic on there, right? I wanted to have a kind of an open forum discussion. I don't see Paul, I don't see Robert, Josh is in the chat. We got 2 people viewing. But one interesting thing that was a question that Josh had put forward. And that'll be something that, if the hatters, come on and get on screen, then we can ask the question, because Josh posed a very, very interesting question. But I'll table that because, well, we don't have Paul here. We don't have Josh. We don't have Brian. We do have Josh. We don't have Brian, and we don't have Robert. So those are like the hatters, right? So Josh is here in the audience. But again, I don't want to lose out on that discussion. Another interesting piece of feedback. So besides the fact that about the show yesterday, my nephew, right? You guys saw him. I think he showed up. John showed up in one of the shows I was on with. Hey, Paul's here. Let's see, Paul, your screen's not on, so I'm going to add you 2 here. But oh, there we are. Hey, great.
How you doing?
I love the open road again.
Oh, hey. Afternoon, everybody.
How you doing, Paul? How's everything going over in the UK?
It's wet. It's cold. It's although this morning was quite sunny. It's starting to change. The weather. It's very mild, to be honest, for this time of year. Yeah. But when I was just saying to my wife, it's probably 7 or 8 weeks to Christmas, and we're still enjoying being able to go out with just a jumper on, and in my case a hat as well. But I mean, my wife and I went out for a walk and that the weekend, and it was really pleasant. So I can't grumble. Let's put it that way. But otherwise, busy as usual. Making hats and doing things and so on. So yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good to hear. Over here in the U.S., You know, I voted today, so I have my little voting sticker. And I was just talking a little bit about the show that I had yesterday with my brother. And I was really intrigued by that because, well, one, and you know, I shared with you guys that I wasn't going to open it up to everybody else. It didn't mean that you guys couldn't get on there and provide feedback right in the comments. But I wanted to just make sure I had my brother there. My brother, I don't know. I don't know how like people feel about my brother. My brother is, wow, he's probably, my brother Sam is probably out of all my brothers the most similar to me. And we don't share, like I said, we share the same dad, not the same mom. And I always had a special kinship to Sam. You know, people, when I was growing up, they would say, oh, you look a lot like your brother Sam. And I always loved that, right? Because who doesn't want to like look like their bigger, older brother, right? At that age, at a certain age, you're like, you know, besides looking like your dad, you're like, okay, I want to be like big bro or my big brothers. It wouldn't matter. Like if they told me I look like, you know, whoever, I would have been proud. And I still would, you know, and, you know, I look a little less like them these days, only because the hat and the big glasses. But, you know, that's one of those things where I made a purposeful decision to not wear the hat, right? I kind of, like you could still see the hats in the top, at the very top, but you know, I wore glasses, kind of like the glasses I would wear when, you know, folks in the family would see me before I became a hat person. And it was purposeful because, again, we talked about this, right? The very last show I did, I was dressed up as Jake Blues. And I felt like that's part of me, right? That idea, that character, right? We talked about how we want to build the persona, right? But it also part of me, like my pre-hat look, right? Before I wore a hat, how I styled my hair, how the kind of glasses I wore. I didn't have the pie chain because I didn't know, like I knew what pie was. It didn't mean the same thing to me until it dawned on me that, hey, wow, this is like, it's the perfect symbol of universality, right? When people look at the pie chain, if they recognize it as pie, right? It doesn't always happen. Some people think that it's a chai, so they'll think I'm Jewish. But at some point, they'll look at it again and I'm like, oh, that's pi. I was like, yes, it's pi. And then they'll ask me, are you a mathematician? And I'll say no. It's like, so what's the deal? You know, and it starts a conversation, just like the hat does. Sometimes the look, everything starts a conversation. And I always come out better for it. It's very rewarding because it's kind of like, I felt like that person was invested in me. They felt emboldened, right, to say, what's that about? And then once I explain, I feel like the wheels turn and they get like, oh, okay, I get it. You know, and I'll tell them, I say, it's the universal language, right? Mathematics, just like music, it's part of the universality of the human experience, right? And that, like I said, as long as every time you can identify it, I already know you're one of me, right? Because you are a human being. There's no way I could sit there and treat you like dirt, right? I now know you as somebody that recognizes this, and you recognize me as somebody that recognizes this. Now, hopefully, we treat each other a little bit nicer, a little bit courteous, a little bit more patient. And again, I feel like that's all it really takes, right? We don't really interact with that many people at that level, right? It's just kind of like we meet each other on the street. We'll say, we'll do this, maybe have a conversation, and then we go on off our merry ways and we'll do our own thing. But it's always done. It's like, it's better than the situation that I described, right? With the person waited outside for that lady, right? We know that lady parked wrong. I saw that. That was a really bad parking job. But that gentleman stood there, right? So he saw that, took it as an affront to his vehicle and waited. And I don't know how long that gentleman waited. Like, I'm assuming they didn't know each other. So he waited. And Paul, I may be speaking about a story you're not familiar with. I don't know if you heard this story, but you know, I was out at a thrift store and I was kind of just going over because the two stories I told on my part involved the thrift store. And I'm like, yep, that makes sense. You know, like if you're somebody chasing vintage hats, you're going to be checking out thrift stores. You're going to be checking out a bunch of places. And in this particular instance, I was leaving and I saw a lady out in front of me with a big shopping cart. And she was doing the thing that a lot of people do, like when they leave a store. She was very happy, meaning she found whatever it was that she was looking for, and looked like she found a lot of what she was looking for because she had a cart. And she was going to her car. So I'm watching, and I'm kind of like, I like that because, like, you know, I came away empty-handed that day, meaning I didn't find that thing, right? I didn't find a hat, I didn't find a jacket or anything that like really said, I gotta own you, right? I gotta come take you home. So I was, you know, I was like, but I was kind of in many ways living vicariously through that lady because I was like, oh, she found something. So I'm like, okay, so I was relishing that. So obviously I'm watching her because I'm watching the human experience, but as she's approaching the car, I see another gentleman get out of his car right next to her and just yell every expletive in the book at this lady. And I saw her car, right? And I figured out, okay, I see what's going on here. She parked what, like I said, what we call in New York, asshole parking, right? So sorry for the expletive, but it's how it's termed, right? I think a lot of people have heard that term. It's not a New York thing, but we call it asshole parking. And okay, that was a little thoughtless of her, right? To just go and park. You know, you're supposed to go in and stay within the lines, but she parked like at a diagonal. So this gentleman took it as a personal affront to his vehicle. So I understand, right? But he took it a step further in that I'm going to wait for this person. So you can imagine, right? You get a little heated, right? You see that sometimes. I know I have a very old car, but I still love that car. If that was my vehicle, I'd be upset. But not enough to stay there and wait, because who has that kind of time? Right. So you can tell this person was fuming. And when he got it, he was waiting for that moment for that lady to show up. Once she showed up, he went to town. And this is a much younger gentleman, right? So it looked like he could have been more than mid-20s in my mind. This lady was maybe in her 40s. Didn't matter. I was there and I saw him escalating, and I'm like, okay, it's a pretty decent parking lot. I had to make sure that wasn't going to get physical, because you never know. People just in a moment that they don't even think about it, they do things that they otherwise wouldn't do if they had a moment to really sit there and think. And I had to give that guy something to think about, other than that lady, because that lady was getting scared now. And I don't even know if she spoke English, to be honest, because it looked like she didn't like understand. And that made him even more angry, that she couldn't sit there and understand all the expletives that he was laying on her. And she was just kind of like, you know, doing that. And I'm like, okay, at this point, I chose to go and get myself into visual, meaning I'm going to go make eye contact with this guy to let him know, hey, we're seeing what's going on here. Like, right? Say your piece, right? We understand your car is the greatest car ever. And this lady had no business, right? If she had probably the words, she probably would have apologized. Maybe she did. Because usually sorry is something that people know, even if they don't speak the language. Doesn't matter. She wasn't escalating it. He was just needed to get this stuff out. But I was afraid that he was going to take it further. In which case, I'm like, I have to do it not just for her, but for him, right? Because maybe he's a nice guy and has never done anything like that before. Maybe he just got the car. I'm like, why would you go, right? Let's say you're going to ruin your life and that lady's life, right? I mean, assuming that, right? It's a man versus a woman, and maybe I made that up. Maybe I concocted that doom scenario in my mind, and he had no intention. Doesn't matter. I needed to give him something to think about, to say, oh my gosh, yeah. Let me just get in my car and drive. And that's what he did. He saw me, and it wasn't like I was coming at him to like do something. Like my brother Sammy he did when he heard the story, he was like, oh, you don't want to do that. This is what I would have done. And I appreciate that, because, you know, he's doing the dad thing. Remember, like I said, I go dad mode. That's a family trait. Like we go dad on each other all the time. And I appreciate that. So I'm never offended by it. I said, oh, yeah. So I listened to my brother, but I had no intention, because I don't want somebody to say, okay, I be a vigilante, right? Like I wasn't there to try to fight the guy. I was there to kind of say, oh my gosh, people are watching me. What am I doing? And if I had an intention, right? If my mind was going, I'm going to go and slap this lady or hit her car or do something, who knows? There's people watching. And I was like, I'm not going to let you do that, right? It'll be me getting in front of you to make sure that you're not hurting this lady because she did something wrong, but she doesn't deserve to get assaulted. So again, and I've told stories very similar to this, and I say this only because I know what I'm getting into, right? It's like, but it's that thing of my mind. That could be my mom, that could be my sister, that could be, and I would want somebody else to intervene if I'm not there, because we tend to have this situation where it's called in psychology and sociology diffusion of responsibility, right? When there's a big crowd and something like that happens, nobody acts because they're assuming that, well, somebody else, maybe the police will show up, or I don't want to get involved because I don't want to get hurt. And I understand that, and I don't encourage you to intervene, but I got to think that if I wasn't wearing my hat, right? Like I said, I know it's not bulletproof. I mentioned this yesterday. My hat is not bulletproof, right? And I certainly don't have bulletproof vest. It's like, you have to think about that in the States, especially in Virginia, like, right? And just like I mentioned in the South, people carry guns, right? And not always legally, right? Like, it's very easy to get a gun legally, but criminals can't get guns legally, right? So they're going to do what criminals do, which is carry them illegally. So I guess the point of that story was the hat. Like, as a hat person, I find myself doing that more often, and I can't help but think that it's not a coincidence. And maybe the hat was enough to give the guy pause, right? He's like, okay, there's somebody, right? Remember we talked about how the idea that because of cinema and because of, well, whatever, society, the hat, like, people are a little leery of people in hats, right? Because they're like, whoa.
Yeah.
I
think it elevates you a little bit in the presence of other people. I mean, I think we've said before that I'm just over 6 foot, so with a hat on with another 5 inches or 3 inches probably with this, it does elevate you a little bit more. You come across with a bigger stature because you've taken the courage of wearing a hat, of extending your persona. And in fact, it's not really something that you necessarily think about, but when you analyze it like you just have, it does actually make you think that, yes, you do stand out from the crowd. Now, that might mean that you have raised yourself to become a target, which hopefully isn't the case. But for good or for bad, in many ways, it might be for good. But there are. I think in the UK, especially, you walk down the street. I find this. I just walk down the street and people look, and some people will stop and speak. Not very often, but people look, and that's absolutely fine because they don't see a fine hat very often. I mean, when you look around in the UK, of course we have some nice makers of hats, but not outside of London. Not very many of them, and so it's a bit of an unusual scenario, but. Certainly, I'll harper back to when Ian and I got together, and that was great. I haven't seen Ian lately, actually, so I'm going to have to reach out to him, see how he is.
I hope he's okay.
And we'll put the date in the diary. But when we went out, I think probably because there was 2 of us, it was a lot more impactful, and people did reach out. But I do understand what you're saying, that it does elevate you a bit. I think also in yourself, it makes you feel that a little bit more confident. Now, sometimes you might not want to. And there are times when I go out and I think, I really must put a hat on because it's sunny, it's rainy, or whatever it might be, and I need to protect my head. But I've really had a bit of a night before, or I've I've got up in the morning, I've not really felt 100%, and I just want to segue through the crowd without being noticed, and that's difficult. Especially when you've got a certain look with the hat and the way you dress and so on. But it's all part of the fun. If you don't want it, don't do it.
Agreed. And that's the moral story. Like, meaning that right, the folks that are, and this is not for those folks, right? This conversation, I believe that anybody that wears a hat daily, or let's just say, even if it's not daily, let's just say regularly, right? Even on Sunday, right? Because some people, right, they'll dress up for church, right? And we'll see those photos on Facebook where somebody dresses up to the nine, right? It's their Sunday best, right? We talked about that here. And that's the day that they wear their hat. Even those folks, right, doing it once a week, you will know the difference of how people treat you when you have a hat on versus not having a hat on. So you guys know, and I say this for those folks that I'm like I mentioned before, they're hat curious, right? Maybe Jody, my nephew, even my brother Sammy, right? Who wear the hat. He wore a Yankee cap, right? Because that's his team, right? He's like, I'm a Mets fan, he's a Yankees fan, and I loved it when my son showed up. My son showed up on the stream and then basically saluted, me and his uncle, and he's never met his Uncle Sam. It's funny, and I don't know if I should be ashamed of that, but there's there's reasons. Again, we're kind of scattered. We kind of come together. Usually, what happens is, to be honest, when we get together, it's usually because something bad happened, right? Like there's death, and I really, it's one of those shame, it's kind of a shame that we have to wait for those moments instead of having, well, I just want to get together and just see you guys and just,
It's the same worldwide though, really, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure everybody that watches your channel here, Luke, could say that they've got family issues and challenges, and not necessarily issues, but you just drift apart because your lifestyle, your job, your location where you're living, you go off in a different direction to the people that you love and you grew up with. Here we are. It's Morgan. Hi, Morgan.
Morgan, how you doing? I'll be in New York City tonight, Morgan. So I probably won't be able to get together tonight, but I'll be in New York City for a couple days at least. I'm gonna head out. Well, I'll get something, once I finish the stream, I'll get something to eat and I'll gather my things and I'll make that road trip. It'll be a 5-hour road trip. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to make that happen. And I'm really excited to hear more about how it's been to be on your own, Morgan. Because again, I don't want to sweep that under the rug in terms of that not being a major milestone. I know Morgan and I have conversations, kind of personal conversation in terms of how she's doing, because I can empathize. So when you live alone, there's excitement, but there's also a scary component, right? If you're used to living with family members around and then you're alone, it can be scary, right? Especially in a city like New York City. You're like, wow, I gotta do everything right by myself. That's why I told Morgan when she moved out, and Morgan says, okay, sounds good. I'm not home right now. I'm heading to my old stomping grounds to vote. Good on you, Morgan, for voting. Again, even if Morgan didn't tell me that, I'm not surprised, right? Morgan she gives me a lot of hope for the next generation. So good on you for voting, Morgan. So yeah, I told Morgan right away, it's gonna be fine, right? If you need somebody, right? Obviously, my family doesn't know Morgan, but if I introduce my family, Morgan to my family, they'd be like, all right, well, let's make sure she gets something to eat, right? It's just the way it is. And you have to do that. Sometimes you have to kind of rely on friends, maybe a close friend, or what happens is, and this is the nice thing is, if your family is close by, right? A lot of college kids have this experience when they go away to college. What they'll do is they'll come home for the weekend, right? And sometimes they're not able to, right? Because some people go to college across the country or to another country, right? If you're lucky, and to get that experience, that is. But some people, they'll go to college relatively close by. Maybe it'll be a couple-hour drive, and then what they'll do is they'll make it a point to go home on the weekend. And the families always love that, mom and dad especially, because they're like, oh man, we have our kid back. Because you got to understand, it's rough on the family as well, right? They're losing, right? Some families are big and there's always children in the house. But sometimes in my situation, I had one child, right? And luckily he kind of went through college and he was still at home, but he still went to work. Right. And now he's got his own place. He's living with his girlfriend, and he's doing his adult thing. But now I'm like, man, I miss having him around. And that's why I felt so touched when he showed up to the stream, because, well, I got my brother Sam, who he's never met, and then I got my son there all he did was say salute. And then I don't even know if he stayed, but I'm like, it didn't matter. That made my day. Like, it literally made my day. And I know, Paul, like that, I know you have a son, and I feel like some of that stuff is probably universal.
Oh, it definitely. I mean, only this morning, Luke, I had the message from my son. He's just bought his ideal vehicle, which is a Volkswagen, one of these vans. You know, these vans these kids have that go off camping, and you know, they've got doors everywhere, and you know, it's like a Swiss Army knife in a van. Anyway, he bought one of those, and it needs having the bed put in the back, and the shower and what have you. And he was going to buy a kit, because over here in the UK, there's quite a few companies that make these kits, and you can buy them for X amount and put them in a weekend, and it's quite good. But he's just decided he wants to do it himself and build it. So, you know, the message came across this morning: "Hey, Dad, have you still got your circular saw, your jigsaw, your tools, your this, your that?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, you know, my van, yes. I've decided to actually kit it out myself. Can I borrow them?" Okay. So, and I said, and I suppose would you like some help? You know, I'm still waiting for that one, but he'll turn up on Saturday, want to get on the drive, use all the tools, you know, drink all the juice out of the fridge, and eat the food out of the freezer. But you know what? Like every parent, you just love that little bit of extra time you can spend with your children, and that's, you know, that's lovely. And now, of course, my daughter's got some grandchildren, so it's nice seeing them every now and again. They live a little bit further away, but yeah, it is universal. You're right.
Yeah, and that's why when I talk about family, it's not an accident, because I'm telling you, like, I come from this stock, right? And that's why I show my family. I showed my brother, and my brother, like I said, it's no accident that my brother Sam is like the first person I had on screen from the family, because, well, I felt like when he saw me doing this, he felt like, he's like, wow, how can I help you? Right? So how can I do this? And then he recommended a movie. He's not a fine hat guy, so he didn't have a hat movie, but this was literally his favorite movie. And he said, you know, Luke, well, he calls me Junior, because like I'm Luciano Junior, but Luke, right? Everybody calls me Junior, but he's like, this is my favorite movie ever. Like, it changed my life. And again, I'm telling you guys, because you guys probably, you know, Paul, you mentioned that you didn't see the stream, but now, when I went and when he made the recommendation, I literally got that movie that day, and I saw it that night. And then, because he told me, he's like, you know, I don't know what he was thinking, but I know that when friends talk or when family talk, sometimes I think we're very used to people not following up, right? Not following through. And it's a little bit of a, you know, I understand it, because, right, there are a lot of people make promises. They'll say, yes, we'll do that. And then life happens, right? They're well-intentioned. And some people just like to tell you what you want to hear, or what they think you want to hear. And then they'll brush it off, right? And he's that type of person that he's okay with that, meaning that he'll make the recommendation, but I know how it is. And the movie really tackles that concept, that cynicism that we have. So I felt in that instance, it was my obligation to stand out, right? Besides the fact that I stand out, like, I'm the only brother that wears a fine hat. You made that recommendation, I'm literally going to watch that movie tonight and then tell you I watched it. And then he didn't know that I was going to make it a show. I told him, I said, listen, it's not a hat movie, but I like the movie. I really like it. I'll figure out something. And then it dawned on me, like, you know, I had an epiphany, you know, kind of like, you know, it happens, you know, organically some days. And I'm like, I'm going to do this. And then I was going to make it a hat chat, but I'm like, oh, hat, you know, it's not a hat movie. So then it dawned on me, I'm like, okay, the movie is about a pyramid, right? So essentially a pyramid scheme, but for good, right? For doing good deeds. So that whole idea, in the business world, we call it MLM, right? Multi-level marketing, right? And basically it's a pyramid scheme. And that's what the protagonist in this movie, his idea was, you're going to start with me at the very top, and I'm going to do a favor, right? I'm going to pay it forward to 3 people and I'm going to do something that they're not able to do by themselves. And he does that, like, and it's an 11-year-old boy, because he got an assignment from his teacher, who's a cynic, right? It ends up being one of the people that he helps, one of his 3 people. And the teacher tells them, how are you going to change the world? And then your assignment is to actually do it. You know, one of those assignments that, you know how it is in class sometimes. A teacher gives you an assignment, you just, oh, what is the minimum that I have to do to get the check mark? But this boy was different in that he was like, no, that you opened this new idea in my head, I'm gonna act on it. And the first thing he does is takes a homeless man and brings him to his house, and just gives him something to eat and treats him like a human being. Like, hey, you're not a stranger, you're just somebody that has a problem, meaning you're homeless, and there might be a good reason for why you're homeless. Turns out he was a drug addict. And that's why he was homeless. And he gave him a place to stay and gave him some money. Gave him some money so that he could go and buy, I believe it was a piece of some clothing so that he could get a job. And all he did, and this is an 11-year-old boy that believed in him and was able to set in chain a chain of events for that individual to make a difference to somebody else. Because the idea is, the only thing I want back is you have to pay it forward. That is, you have to go find 3 new people and do that same thing that I did for you. Well, meaning that the same thing, but do a good deed, something that they can't help, and you can't get rewarded for it, right? That you can't ask anything in return. And then the idea is that 1 to 3, 3 becomes, 9, 9 becomes 27. And the idea behind, right? A lot of scammers use the pyramid scheme to get very rich very quickly, because it's kind of like the law of compound interest, right? It gets really big. But the beautiful part about this movie was that he took that idea, and when I saw it, I said, well, that's a pyramid scheme. And I even said it right in the screen, like, that's a pyramid scheme. But when he described it, I'm like, wow, I can't even call it a pyramid scheme anymore, right? Because in the movie, the teacher, his cynical teacher that gives him the assignment, is a big lover of words. And he put forward the word euphemism. And that was something that he told to the boy's mom. And the mom didn't even know what the word meant. So she looked it up, euphemism, a substitute for something, a substitute word, a nicer word or a nicer version of something that is a little unpleasant, or you know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go and have that. So instead of a pyramid scheme, I'm gonna call this the pyramid stream, because we take the scheme out of it, right? Still a pyramid, but it's a stream. And the idea behind the series is, well, besides hacks, what are good movies? What are good conversations, right? Maybe career conversations, maybe life conversations, movies, music, etc. They're not hack stuff, but they still matter. And family matters, right? That's why that show existed. Family Matters. And that's why I felt so confident that I was gonna bring Sam on there, and we're gonna have just a conversation. I wasn't gonna wear my hat. I was gonna look a little bit more like the junior that he knew when I was growing up, before my hat journey. And like I said, I thought it was really beautifully done. It was a couple hours long. Hopefully Sam was okay with that. He seemed like he was having fun, because I was having fun. And my dad saw it. My dad called me literally a few hours later and told me, had a whole long conversation about how great it was. He said, I didn't understand everything you were saying, but it was so good to see you and your brother on screen having a really great conversation and smiling. And then he said, don't worry, but we'll watch it later on. I'll watch it with one of the family, and they'll tell me what you guys were saying,
Terrific.
I don't know. It was touching to me.
Yeah.
But so it looks like in terms of conversations today, you saw the question that Josh posed, and Robert's not here, but hopefully we can ask him whenever he does join us. If it's not today, maybe another time. But Josh asked a very, very interesting question, and I know Robert's already answering it in the chat. But I want to kind of pose it here. And let me just get back to the Robert's still typing. Sorry, Robert. But we'll go. I'll get to your comments. It's only because I get easily distracted. So I just want to make sure I get this exactly. And then it says, where are you, Josh? I think there was been so much typing. Okay, it says, so he posed it to Robert, to Paul, and to Brian. Question: if you could start over in hat making, what would you do first? And obviously, I'm not a hat maker. Paul and Josh are here. But yeah, Paul, I mean, I don't know if you had a chance. I don't think you replied in the group chat.
I did, actually. Okay. Yeah, I did reply. But I think you have to remember that we're all different characters and we've got all different ways of looking at life. Yeah. And I guess the type of career path that we may have taken has an effect on that. And my career path has been very much into sort of management and retail and buying and all of that sort of thing. Now, what that does is it means that there's a level of detail that I go into, and now I think I've mentioned before that I'm lucky enough to be able to consult or coach a number of business owners in helping them develop their business, and what that makes me is quite a detailed person. So sometimes I'm a bit over the top, to be honest with you. So there's a school of thought that I have to sit down and talk to myself sometimes and say, look, don't over egg it, mate. Just get on and do it. And the other side is, well, don't just get on and do it because you might get something wrong. And so therefore, I think what I'd say is that as hatters, we have to stick out and be something that we call a unique selling proposition, a USP. Okay, so where do we fit in the market? And that's from the hats that we make, the prices that we charge, the materials that we use, the location that we might be in. All of these things take into consideration. And so I would say that I would probably do a little bit more research than I did on who else is there in the UK market. Now, I think I've said before that I don't believe there's any more than about 50 male hatters in the UK. Lots of milliners, probably 300 or more milliners, but not many male hatters. And so therefore it's quite limited to see what they're doing. And in fact, there's quite a restricted marketplace because of our tastes in the UK. So it does make it a challenge. And I've repeated on a few occasions now, a lot of my followers on my YouTube channel, which we're up to nearly 500 now, they are, thank you, they are American based. And it's lovely that somebody in America gets something out of what I'm putting together. So that's sort of great. But yeah, having done the research, if you like, I'd be looking at what materials and researching materials, researching suppliers, researching the design of hats, and probably doing more of the buying of the older hats and deconstructing and reconstructing them. I mean, I did that without really, when I first started off, without really thinking that eventually I'd like to make my own hats. It was just a necessity that I bought some hats. They were shrunk over the years that they had been made, and in fact needed to be stretched back to the size that they should have been. And some of them, in fact, were because when I researched it, the average size of a gentleman's head in the UK is a size 58. And so a lot of the hats that I was buying at the time were more 54, 55, 56, because they were from the sort of 40s, 50s, 60s, when gentlemen's heads were a lot smaller. And so taking them apart and replacing, stretching them on a block and replacing the sweatband and the trimming and so on was how I could learn to actually make the hat. But then what I did was I made my own tools. So I had a look on and researched my tool requirement from YouTube mainly, actually, and I looked at what Hornscoff and Hufford and other people were using, because lots of the other hatters make predominantly Western style hats, and it wasn't the sort of area I wanted to get into. It was the reason I looked at Hornscoff and Hufford were because they were the type of people and the type of businesses that I'd love to be able to emulate here in the UK, and as a homage to them and to the type of hats, and so I started making and replicating their type of hats, and then I started buying, secondhand tools as well as my own tools, and it's sort of flourished from there. And I think the other thing I'd say is when you do start making your own hats, probably make 20 or 30 hats before you start selling them in the marketplace. And I would say keep a spreadsheet of the cost of the materials, what materials you actually use. And it might sound silly, but you've got the cost of the felt, you've got the different size ribbon that goes around both the brim and the crown, you've got the leather sweatband, you've got the shellac. All these things, they add up pennies. But the old saying I'm sure it's in America as well, you take care of the pennies and the pounds will come rolling in. And it's not that we're trying to make a fortune out of hatting. Believe me, I can make more money out of other things that I do than out of hatting. But what it does is it means that you're in control. And I think for anybody that is starting off, especially as a youngster, and they're trying to make some money out of hatting, I think the first few years, and I think I've certainly read that Robert had this situation, was that the first, I think he said 5 years, he was actually plowing back all of his money into buying materials and buying equipment. And I can certainly see that. I guess because I've narrowed the type of hats that I'm doing, I perhaps don't need so many brim blocks and hat blocks, but I do have probably 10 or 12 brim blocks and probably the similar amount of hat blocks. I'm always buying one or two each month, so that's a continued thing. And then I'd say, look at the marketplace and look at how am I going to actually communicate that I'm a hatter to the market, because it's one thing having a really great product, but then if you don't tell anybody,
that's right,
nobody knows anything about.
That's right.
Marketing sounds a bit silly, but you've got to start thinking website, YouTube channel, social media, sponsorship, all this sort of stuff that actually gets you out there and gets you in front of people. And the other thing is, at what timing do you do all of that? Because clearly there's a cost implication and there's an investment in time implication. So what people we've all heard the story about things like high fashion and perfume, where the profit margins are horrendously high, and they're high for a reason, because actually they plow an awful lot of money into photographic shoots, models, lifestyle projection, because they're not selling the smell, they're selling the way that it makes you feel and the experience it gives you when you put it on. And likewise with clothing, handbags, bags, all those sort of things. And I guess to a degree, we are as hatters are getting into that marketplace and becoming fashion designers. Who would have thought? Really, who would have thought? But that's what you're becoming. You're becoming somebody that designs a piece of fashion that somebody else will find attractive enough to pay you some money and wear on a regular basis. And I think we then have a responsibility, if you like, to invest in what we're doing and understand more and learn, constantly learning more about what we're doing, and putting that back into part of our heart and soul of building a hat.
Right. And this is an interesting comment here from Josh. I reached out to a guy on Facebook Marketplace because he was selling his old hat because it did not fit him anymore. I offered to resize it for him, and now he wants to meet up for me to resize it for him. That's amazing.
That's exactly what you want.
Way. That's a way to get awareness, because that's what really Paul was discussing is awareness.
I mean, it's I think look, in the UK at the moment, I'm talking to a number of music artists in their various genres, and what I want is on my by the way, before I forget, I've actually put Good Looks onto my website so that people can now there's a sample of a video, the one we had with Robert, myself, and you. And it's up there alongside mine, so that they can click on mine, they can click on yours, and then they can become a follower. Hopefully that will get you a few more followers. But
that sounds good to me. Thank you, Paul. That's wow, I'm touched. Now I got to figure out how to do that. I'm sure it's pretty easy. YouTube has really good tutorials. And it's probably easier than I'm making it out, but I always like to make it out difficult. And then I'm pleasantly surprised when it's like, oh, it wasn't like poking myself in the eye.
No, look, I think networking. What I was basically coming on to for what you're saying and about how with Josh's question, which I think is really a good question, is think about how can you network into a limited marketplace? Because when I look at the statistics, the analytics, if you like, from my YouTube channel, 70-something% of my clients are over the age of 65. Oh, sorry, people that are watching my videos are over the age of 65 years old.
Right.
Now, I mean, clearly, if that's an unusual marketplace, but what it means though is that they're watching my videos for a lot longer than they're watching some, younger people are watching other videos for. So they're a loyal bunch. These people, I very rarely lose people off my channel. Every now and again I might use one, and then the next day I'll back up to that number, but very rarely. I've probably seen that 4 or 5 times in the last sort of 15 months or so that I've been doing the channel. These things are building bricks, and the problem that we've got is that because we're operating in such a limited marketplace here in the UK, especially, maybe not so much in America, because one, it's a huge country with a hell of a lot of people, 5-6 times more people than we have here in the UK, and you've got a lot more people that are used to and want to buy hats. So if I had my time again, and I was talking to my wife about this, we probably would have got onto a plane now and gone over to Canada or on the borders of Canada, probably around Maine and Connecticut, where we've got some family, and lived there and made hats for both the American and the Canadian marketplace. Not that, as you know, I still make hats and send them like these, and ones that you and I have spoken about, and send them over to America. And actually, it's even very easy now, even though Trump has made a few changes to the market space. So, but coming back to Josh's thing, I think it's treat it as you've got to decide, when do you stop treating it as a hobby and when do you start treating it as a business? And then when it becomes a business, what are your goals? For 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 5 years, whatever. But not that you can't change those, but you just have to put some sort of stake in the ground so that when you achieve your goal, you can praise yourself. You can feel as though you've done the right thing. I mean, one of the goals I did was I said, look, I want to earn £1,000 a month. I want to sell 4 or 5, 6 hats. And from that, I'll be quite happy with that. Well, actually, I'll be absolutely ecstatic with that, And I think, most of the time I've been making hats, I've exceeded that quite comfortably. Right now, it's a little bit quiet here in the UK because of, I think, the general marketplace. But, in general, that's been able to succeed. The other thing is to actually learn more, and what that really entailed me in doing was reading more, listening to Robert's videos, looking at other people that are hatters and what style and things they're doing, and it's even down to finessing the customer experience, because it's not just about the hat. It's about how the hat makes your customer feel when they get it. So, putting some information about how to look after the hat, thanking the customer for their service, making yourself easy access for them to get hold of you. So they almost think like you're a friend, and they can just ring you up. They can message you on WhatsApp or whatever and get hat tips and support. And presentation. Presentation. Think about, how am I going to present this beautiful hat that I've actually made, and get it to somebody in one piece, so get a custom box made, get some packaging made, get some stickers made. I've got all that stuff that goes on there, and it's great.
Yeah. And Josh says, one advice I heard was, when the day job starts costing you money on your hobby. Interesting phraseology there. And I got to think, those successful small businesses, right, that those side hobbies that somehow end up turning into like monoliths, it makes sense. Again, I don't know how common that is, right? But that's a nice problem to have.
I mean, here's one little story. Many years ago, do you remember these little smart cars that Mercedes came out with?
Yes.
I bought one as a bit of fun, and I became engrossed in the owners club. And what I was seeing was that Mercedes wasn't doing a very good job of supporting the brand. So I went ahead and opened a garage, and in fact, I opened 3 garages that were specialists in smart cars, and it was a hobby. Got into a business. I poured a lot of money into it, a lot of time. My wife and family were in it, and it was a distraction on what I should have been doing, quite frankly. And it was probably, I mean, one of the things that we did do, if you've ever seen the movie Night and Day with Tom Cruise.
I don't know if I've seen that one. Let me
Night and Day. It's KNIGH, Night and Day.
Okay.
It's a sort of spy type movie. I guess it's a fun movie. In there, they've got some smart cars, and it was myself working with the same people that were involved with the Bond movie cars, and they did the cars for Skydance, which is the production company for Tom Cruise, and I was retained on some of the cars, not all of them. There was about I think it was 6 or 8 cars, and we did half of them, where we performance tuned them and made them a lot handle a lot better and control a lot better. But you know, I've done things like putting nitrous oxide onto a smart car and all that sort of stuff, and I'm not proud of it now. And in fact, I'm just using the analogy that, you know, I did that for about 13 years. I invested and lost a lot of money because of a number of different things, and I enjoyed it for the time, and it was a moment, if you like. But the point being that it would be lovely for all of us to have a hobby that then goes over into a business. But when you start becoming a business, you've then got associated costs. You've got overheads of the location where you might be running the business from. You've got people. You've got to pay people such as accountants, bookkeepers. You know, all of these different things have a cost. And even though, you know, I run my my hat business through my other businesses, and actually, you know, they're sort of sucked up, if you like, with the costs that I have in that business, which makes it a lot easier. If you like, I've got a multifaceted business now that it all only needs one set of accounts. So that way it's easier. But if I were to set up a business just doing hats, it would lose its appeal, because a lot of the time, the income that we've got from the hats would actually be paying for the cost of running the business. And so you have to be very, very careful. And to make a hat business viable here in the UK, looking at the margins and so on there, the volume is such that you'd need to be doing, you know, 20 hats a month upwards. And actually, that's quite a commitment in time and numbers to keep going with on a regular basis, which is probably partly why we don't see that many hat businesses surviving here in the UK.
Right. And that, Paul, I think you gave basically a master class, to be honest. It's true. I mean, the thing about it is, and again, it's so great that you found your way into this hobby, right? Obviously, it was a not your one's favorite way to enter the hat hobby, but the fact that you brought in that kind of experience, and I don't know, because I don't know that many hatters, but I gotta imagine that you are pretty unique in that, in the domains of your domains of competence before you got into the hat hobby, and now we're seeing kind of like the beautiful, like you know, kind of like that what do you call it, fusion, right, of your past experience with this new domain, right? This domain that's fairly new to you. I know you mentioned 18 months. It blew my mind when you said 18 months I've been kind of doing this. And I hope I got that right. Wow. That goes to show you, right, that past experience was valuable, right? Regardless of whether you made money and lost money, regardless, right? It's valuable because now you're benefiting, right? Your new passion here in hats. You're seeing the benefits of that experience, and we're now benefiting from it.
That's nice to think, isn't it? I mean, I think also I'd say that don't be afraid to try different suppliers of different materials and things. And so I've been buying quite a lot of you know, leather sweatbands and the trimmings for the hats and so on from manufacturers in the UK, because in a place called Luton, which is just north of London. It was the main sort of capital of hat making for many, many years, hundreds of years in the UK. And so I researched around there and bought them. But in fact, you know, America has got many very, very good manufacturers of hats and felts and so on.
Yeah.
And I've been reaching out and buying the odd things from there. And of course, as I've said on many occasions, FEPSA in Portugal have supplied me with my felts. And I've tried buying felts in the UK, and I've not got anywhere near the value and the quality of the felts, in my opinion, that I'm buying from FEPSA. So, you know, it's I'd say again, you know, just research it and do it and find it. And it's worthwhile. It's interesting that Josh is leather making. It's something that leather restoration was something that was a hobby of mine prior to hat making, and it was you know, so I developed a few tools and a collection there, and also some skills of being able to take leather and clean it and feed it and so on. And in fact, you know, I sort of took quite a lot of the money that I'd made on the leather side and put it into the hat side. So if you go, oh hi Ian, if you go into my garage, I've probably still got about 25 briefcases and Gladstone bags and all the like in there, which I've promised my wife that I will get rid of, but you know what it's like. You never get around to it, really, do you?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that thing? You were serious about that? I thought you were joking.
I know, but the worry is that, I mean, I've got one Gladstone bag there that the current price of it to get it made now, and it's still made, is £6,000.
Wow.
You know, for one leather bag by Swain, Aidney and Brigg, which is a famous leather goods company here in the UK. And I mean, I picked it up for a few £100, restored it, and it's absolutely stunning. And in fact, I'm going to use it now to, if I go out with hats or anything, I'll put stuff in there. But I've used it on occasion, but it's so heavy. But getting back to the hats and Josh's question on the leather, I've sat down and looked at making leather sweatbands, and I've spoken to my leather suppliers and all this sort of thing. And you know what? You can't do it for the price that you can buy them for already done. You know, it's one of those areas where you think, you know, I could invest a ton of money in some equipment and in some leather, an awful lot of time, and still not get as good a result as these guys are getting. So I think it's good to try it, but you know, just beware.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. It's, you know, it's one of those things. Sometimes you just can't do it, you know. And then for my birthday, I bought a whole leather side. I'm making into a new leather bag. I love this. It is funny because I don't know, you know, I started getting into leather, right? Leather jackets. And again, I think, I only have one that I can fit, that I can actually fit into. I bought several only because now learning, right? So it's on the Fedora Lounge, right? There's a very, very great hat subforum, but there's also a great outerwear subforum. And one of the gentlemen, I mentioned his name before, Nathan, who goes by the Last Cowboy. I would see his photos, and I'm like, wow, the combination of a fine hat and a leather jacket really does look good. And obviously, we've seen Morgan, right? Morgan got herself a leather jacket, and you know, together paired with her fine hat, it looks really sharp. And so it got me like on this whole rabbit hole about securing a leather jacket. And I found one, and I did post it. It was by a company called Shot, and they're based out of New York City. It's one of those leather jacket makers that is a very, very fine reputation. And I managed to get one locally from a gentleman that lost a bunch of weight. You know, and I'm like, all right, I guess I'm back at the core. Right, somebody else lost weight, and then I get to inherit their jacket. I'm like, I love it. And he gave me such a great deal, and ended up friending me on Facebook because he felt like he needed to follow up, because he said, "Wow, I really fought myself with the idea of do I get this tailored, right? Send it off to get tailored, and then maybe I can still enjoy it, or do I just give it a new home?" And it got me, the wheels were turning in my brain, because I'm like, wow, that's kind of how I feel sometimes with hats, right? Even though I don't restore them, but you know, it is one of those things where you get a hat, you know, it's not in the condition that you want to wear it. But now you're like, okay, do I sell it and give it a new home, or do I actually learn how to restore it, right, and then give it a new home, or maybe after I restore it, I want to keep it.
Well, I mean, I've got Shot, Avirex, and Timberland. I've got too many leather jackets, so I'm not even going to go there. And this is just for Josh. This is what I've been working on this week.
Oh wow! Wow!
So I'm just restoring these, and we'll see whether we. I use them for a photo shoot and then probably sell them. But it's another hobby of mine.
Well, it's getting into the point where I acquired a leather jacket that I know will not fit me, and the idea is, okay, I'm gonna rehome this with me. I saw it and it's a Brooks Brothers, a Brooks leather jacket. And it was a kind of a perfecto style, right? If you guys are into leather jackets, you kind of know the cross zip, the motorcycle jackets. Oh, yeah. It's size 40. There's no way I'm going to fit into a size 40 anytime soon. I'm more like a 46. So I kept it. I put it for sale on the Fedora Lounge, and it got me thinking. I'm like, okay, the hats, and obviously I've sold hats before. I have yet to sell a jacket yet, but I've now acquired a decent number of jackets, and they're not all leather. I've gotten all the jackets that I've acquired, and some of them don't fit me. One of them is a Harrington.
Well, about you there. Yeah.
Wow, what a great jacket! What a great jacket that jacket is. So if you guys don't know about the Barracuda jacket by the G9, right, also known as the Steve McQueen jacket.
That's
Such a great jacket. It really is. And I put it on. It doesn't quite fit. Like maybe I'm supposed to lose a little bit of weight, right? So if it doesn't sell, I might fit into this jacket if I lose another, 15 to 20 pounds, maybe, which my doctor wants me to do. Like I'm like 225 right now. She wants me to get into the 200. And I said, how about 199? Only because my brain will be more comfortable with a 1 in front of that number. So my goal is to get to 199 pounds. And my benefit will be if I don't sell that jacket, well, I'll get to wear that jacket. Hopefully, we'll see if maybe I need to lose more. But it's a 44. I believe that size 44. But the Harrington jacket, like the G9, they run small, meaning the 44 is probably really like a 42 or maybe less. Yeah. So maybe I won't be able to wear it, but I feel like I could. So right now, that's my motivation. That'll be the side benefit if I don't rehome that jacket. And it got me also thinking about wanting to do my own store, right? My own online store. So that's what I'm gonna do. So in 2026, I will have my own online store. Yeah. And I'll have my hats and I'll have my jackets. And then you guys can go. Hopefully over the world. I mean, I don't know. I haven't figured it out that well yet. But Paul, I know you already have your online store set up. I'm going to do that because, I don't know, I feel like this could be fun.
Well, maybe. I mean, I've been talking about with one of my ex-business partners. He now lives in Vancouver, but buying hats and jackets and vintage clothing in America in bulk from thrift stores and things, and then shipping them back to the UK and selling them over here. I mean, there's a big market in it, but I just at the moment with all the import things with Trump and so on, I think I'm going to let things settle down a bit. But I think it's a good way to go. I'm certainly thinking for my website with the hats. I'm thinking putting scarves of a certain color with the hats and putting a few male accessories. So not going mad and not going keeping it very much sort of gentrified, if you like, for gentlemen and just having a few bits and pieces. But I've seen one or two other people in the UK do that, and they're selling a few. I mean, I'm not sure that it's going to be big business, but it's a nice thing to do. And at the end of the day, I think for me, for the next 10 years, I think that the UK is still going to be growing back into the culture of wearing hats, and I'm probably not going to see it myself growing to a point where it could be a full-time job for somebody like myself. I think it's got a long way to go, but who knows? It would be nice to think.
Yeah, exactly. I love that because again, the thing about it is there's very little money in complete pessimism, right? Usually the money is in having optimism, but not just blind optimism, right? You have to have a method, and right, and have the ability to say, okay, what could go wrong? You know, and right. So the idea is not to just go into something blindly, right? That's not, I know that's certainly not something that Paul, right, in knowing Paul and watching his the way he describes his process, I know that's something that Paul doesn't do, and I certainly wouldn't want to do that. But we're both comfortable, like I said, you don't get to our age and not have failures, right? But if we view them as learning opportunities, right? If you view them as learning opportunities, and you obviously you don't, like, kind of like my brother yesterday described, don't put yourself into a position where everything is all your eggs in that basket, right? So that you can fail, but maybe the idea is maybe I can fail forward, right? That's even a book, how to fail forward. And that's what it's all about. And you guys that are like half our age, that's right. And I'm talking to like my son and my nephew, and everybody, like Morgan. The idea is, right, don't run away from your failures, right? Learn from them, put yourself in a position to learn from them. But the idea is, how do I fail forward so that, right? So Paul described, all his experiences about, like, I made some money, I lost some money, but now that's made Paul into the man he is and the businessman that he is, so that he can go and make the most out of his latest passion. And that's a lesson, that I hope that when you guys, right, we know about tuning, right? The fact that we use heuristics and we tune out so many things, I really hope that you guys don't tune that out, because, well, it could be a life-changing thing if you guys get this and are able to implement, right? Because time, right, is the most valuable resource that you have. And if you're able to figure that out at 20 or 25 or 30 instead of 50, 55 or 60, then you're in a much better position to really benefit. And it could be really like a life. You could be altering the course of your family tree, to be honest. And I'm thinking lofty and I'm thinking big, but it can be, because folks have done it.
Yeah, anyway. I think a lot of it is about what we're seeing now is more and more life coaches and business coaches. And in fact, all that really is a posh way of putting, talk to more people, network with people, listen to what experiences they've had, take what they've had on board and influence what you're doing. And I think, I've sat back over the last few years and do it more and more now and think, I can't change a great deal of what I've got and I'm happy. And you know what, coming to terms with your lot, I'm happy with that. And then being able to pass on information to help other people, I'm very happy with that. So it's a way of segmenting your life, I guess, is thinking, well, look, in the first 10 years, I'm going to get a good education, both at school, college, university, or whatever. And then my second 10 years, I'm going to learn about life in general, relationships, both personal and business. And I'm going to think about finding a career that might suit me. And it's not going to be the first thing that I jump into. The third 10 years is about cementing some of those relationships and maybe getting married or whatever, and also cementing more about your career and thinking about where that path is going to take you. And the fourth 10 years is really making that jump from an entry level in your career to a middle management section, let's say, and then deciding whether actually senior management is where you want to be, and that's your fifth 10 years. And before you know where you are, you're approaching an age where you have probably bought a property, had children, gone through your life, and you're thinking about how to wind down from that. So by segmenting your life and actually mapping that path out and talking to people that are able to, if you're talking forward, as it were, so you're coming up to your second 10 of years, talking to people that have gone through that, and you can affect that, is a thing that might be worth considering.
Yeah, Paul. Wow. That's, again, I love just the word segmentation and segmented, right? It just brings back so much memories, right? In terms of like compartmentalizing, right? That's maybe another word that's very similar, right? And the idea still is, right, it still gets back to a stepwise approach, being very, very purposeful and gradual in your process, and not trying to rush the process, because that becomes really I think the Achilles heel for a lot of folks that are very ambitious, right? That they want to shortcut the process. Okay, I know where I want to do. Now I want to be there yesterday.
Yeah, but it's about the journey. I call it life mapping, and what and you know, there's lots of people that I might start talking to on the business management front, and you'd be amazed at how many people haven't actually sat down with their business partner or their own life partner or husband or wife, and actually gone through what are they trying to do with their life, and what are their expectations, what are their wants and desires, and we're all guilty of it, but but when you look at a life map and you take yourself from 10 years old through to 90 years old, and then what I do is I put on there on each of the at what sort of age do you go to college, what sort of age do you go to, and how long for. And when you start mapping this out on this, I use an Excel spreadsheet, but when you start putting it out there, before you know where you are, you've got periods of your life where you've defined what society says is the norm for developing your career, developing your personal life, and so on. Now, when you start doing that, then you start mapping onto that what you feel comfortable that you want to achieve. You then start to have a strategy and a plan. Whoa, then you've got something that you can review every given period, whether that's 3 months, 3 years, or whatever you decide you want to do. But sometimes people think, well, that's too controlled. I don't want any of that. That's not for me.
Right.
Other people want some direction and actually feel quite comfortable that they've got something that helps them acknowledge the sort of challenges and issues that they might have going through their life period.
Yeah. It's like the old adage, right? If you fail to plan, well, plan to fail, right? And again, I use that not as right, because failing can be a really good experience if you have the proper mindset. Right, and you have the proper, you have to kind of set yourself. You have to prepare yourself to, right. So every business can fail, but if you have it set up in such a way that you can fail forward, and this is what I really loved about what Josh described, right. So when he talked about, right, your message here was about networking. This is what Josh did. Josh went. Right, because Paul mentioned, right, what Paul was describing is what I like to call the employer value proposition, right? Company value proposition. What are we going to offer the market to stand out? And this is how Josh, right? So obviously this person may not have had any hatters reach out to them. Josh is a hatter that chose to reach out to this potential customer, right? Offer them to resize the hat. Let's say Josh does it for free, right? If Josh is listening, right, and Josh knows how this business works from Paul, from Robert, and Brian, you know that repeat customers is how you can really sell some hats. So Josh can resize this hat for free. Maybe this gentleman says, "Oh my gosh, where have you been my whole life? What else do you have? Make me 8, 9, 10. I mean, I'm obviously exaggerating, but it could be, right? Because Paul's mentioned it. He sold 8 hats to somebody. It's not something that's out of the realm of possibility, and all because Josh decided to have the courage to say, I'm going to reach out to this person and offer my services.
Yep. No, it's the way it works. It's probably on 10 or 20 times I've had people say, where have you been? This is great.
Right.
I wish I knew you were here before. And that comes back to this question of Josh as to what you do if you did it again. And it's about researching how on earth can I get to people out there that are my target market. It's not an easy one, especially when in the UK it's an aging market, and I'm looking at customers that are generally over 55 years old, and of course technology isn't always at the forefront of their mind. They're very much old school, and that's things like press releases and actually getting yourself in magazines, and the old school stuff, if you like, and the new school stuff is very much associating yourself with people that are influencers, as they're now called, but But in the old days, they were just, you know, pop stars or people that were were stars, you know, sports people or personalities of one sort or another. Now we're talking about a very minor level when you're talking about the sort of things that we do. You know, we're talking about maybe making a hat or two for somebody, and in return they'll make their followers aware that we're actually providing them with hats. But you know, those are the sort of things that that you have to do and build these blocks, if you like, and put a plan together to execute that. So that's a media map, if you like. So a media map is first of all looking at the types of media that are relevant to a whole marketplace, and then looking at which of those are relevant to a particular industry, like in our case, this industry, and then what is relevant to the size of the provider. Myself being, you know, a sole trader, as it were, within that area, or well, it's a limited company, but actually on my own doing it. I haven't got a lot of resources to go and put adverts on television, and it wouldn't be relevant, or radio, for instance. So what you do is you narrow down the number of different pieces of media that might be relevant to me as a hatter, and then you start producing the material, both video, paper-based, print-based, and so on, that can support the execution of that communication strategy. So that's a communication strategy. It's a bit like when you walk into the room and you're going in on a business level, and you're looking at people that you'd like to share what you're doing with, and you'd like to find out more about what they're doing. You know, you go in there with a thought process of, I want to talk to that person, and that person, and you think about how you're going to open the conversation. What do you want to get across, and what do you want to get from them? And it's the same thing.
Yeah, and oh man, Paul, that's again, I feel like, and I know you talked about having like the fireside chat with some of your folks that you've done business with, right? To kind of do that. That's such a great, and I know that we're going to have some of our hatters here, and I know I will be eager to consume that content because, well, I just feel like nobody cannot benefit from that kind of content.
Well, it's I think. What I don't want to see people coming into hatting and then leaving after a year, 18 months, 2 years, because they had expectations set very high and they haven't achieved what they felt was appropriate. And I think, you know, if anybody reached out to me and wanted to have a chat about hatting and on the business front, fine, I'm more than happy to talk with them, because I think it's very important that they realize that this is a way of enhancing your living, and actually it may become an overall provider for you if you go down the route like Nick Fouquet and Hufford and Nodes, you know, several other brands that we can talk about. But it's hard work, you know, and are you prepared to invest the money, invest the time? The equipment investment is huge if you do it properly, and or are you somebody that's quite content, like myself, just to be on the sidelines, making a few specialist products, enjoying the sort of lifestyle, if you like, of being able to do some more grown-up work, if you like, and then get to a point where you can be creative. Turn on the, I mean, look, this is a small room that I'm in, as you can see, and I turn on the music and I make a hat. You know, maybe over 2 days I make that hat, and you know, somebody somewhere will have a nice hat eventually. If they buy it, but for myself, the pleasure has been in creating something that you know I can hold up and say, yeah, I sat down, designed that, thought about that, and created it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, and the thing about it is that you know, obviously I don't come at it right. There's no way I could you know, match Paul's experience, you know, but from my vantage point, I tend to make connections with things that, I don't know, I just feel are really universal, right? I keep using that word universal, but you know, I think of what Josh did, and I think of it as like that's like your pickup line, right? When you go and you meet that girl that catches your eye, and now you got to stand out. Like, how do you stand out, right? If she's as beautiful as you think she is, she's probably got several other guys that approached her and she said, we'll get out of here. How are you going to stand out, right? It's like the movie Hitch with Will Smith. right? How are you going to stand out to get that girl, or right? And obviously women can do that as well, right? Women can get the guy or the other woman or whatever, right? Whoever you want, right? How do you go and as a complete stranger stand out and start a conversation and not come across as sleazy or somebody that has ulterior motives, right? Right? Unless that's what unless that's what you're after, right? That's another goal. But if the idea is, wow, that person blew my mind. Like, I got to know that person. I got to get that person out to dinner. How are you going to do it and stand out from the crowd that probably, has already tried and failed? That's, you know what I mean? It's a little weird, but the analogy is there, and it's not any different. And now you're like, oh man, now I got to be, before I do this, I got to really think a little bit.
So not only have you got to know how to make a hat and what style of hat, but you got to know how to communicate that. You got to know how to price it. You got to know where to buy all the materials from it. So all of these things added together give you a whole rounded approach to your little business. And I think so. Understand what you're getting into. Enjoy it as a hobby first, and then it will help you decide whether you think you can go and have the sleepless nights when you've got a customer. I've just had one this week where customers reached out and they've got a beautiful Panama hat that has been in their family for years, and unfortunately it's got soiled and the sweatband is soiled and so on. And they were asking, could I clean the hat? And I said, well, look, I can, but I need to see it. It's going to be probably quite brittle. And so what I would have to say is that if I do it, if I undertake it, then it will be at your risk, because I really, without seeing it, it's very difficult. But the chances are that with a Panama hat, it becomes quite brittle and dry. And so as soon as you start to introduce steam and other materials to, and maybe a bit of isopropanol to clean some of the really ingrained dirt, you could start having some problems. So if the person's got one set of expectations of how clean it's going to come back, and you've got another, and they don't fit, and actually you don't charge them a great deal of money for doing it, because again, their expectation of what it's going to cost them per hour for doing that usually is a lot less than what the reality is going to be. It's just not worth taking on the challenge, to be honest.
These are all things, and I love the way Paul puts that, because it just reminds me of like one of those right, we talked about stoicism, right? The concept of what's the worst that could happen, right? You got to be that. You got to kind of think that way, even if you choose to communicate it differently than you think it. And right, because it's important, right? I call it the language of denotation versus the language of connotation, right? Which is what you say, and there's also how you say it. And they're both equally, and sometimes it could be just the presentation. And you have to kind of, and the nice thing is that the more you practice it, right, you will fail, right? There will be times where you come across and you make a message, and it, right, that's like when you, right, maybe before you reach out to that great someone that catches that you want to make your wife, maybe you got to practice on some girls or some guys, right, well, I'm just going to see if this works or not. And then over time, you start developing like a way of what will work. And you have a more refined palette or toolbox, right? We talked about tools. You will have more tools in your toolbox to be able to get to know what tool you need for the job at hand. And it's a beautiful process. I just love that idea, right? As somebody that's not, right, I have no mechanical inclination. I can do a couple things on my car, but there's something very beautiful about, right, somebody working on their car or working on a piece of leather or working on a hat, right, making it better and then learning something. And then it's kind of like, I don't know, if you stand a little taller, right, you really want to put the hat on now, or you want to really go for that drive, because like, hey, I put some work into this baby, and I want to see what my work got me.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd say again to Josh is that, and I think Robert hinted at this and actually said it quite well. Actually, there's that every time we make a hat for somebody, we're still on edge when we've made that hat and we send it out to them, because we don't always get the correct measurements of their head, even though we might have on a Zoom call these days and we might go through the measuring process and so on. And on very few occasions do I actually see customers coming in because they live or tend to live quite a long way away from me.
Yeah.
So that stress that you're under with one hat, well, you multiply that by 4, 5, 6 times if you're actually doing this as a full-time job.
Right.
And the reality is that if something goes wrong, the consequences are you can give the money back to the customer and sell the hat to somebody else. You can remake the hat, or you can alter the hat that they've got. But it's the time that that it takes, and it's not only in the hat making businesses. I've got other clients that, you know, their workers have made mistakes on jobs, and when you look at the analysis of what it costs you to go out there, rectify that work, with the lost opportunity in time, the money that it's cost you, and the extra materials that it's cost you, it's wiped out the profit on that job.
Right.
So again, you know, these are things that you need to consider, that going from being a hobby where, you know, you finish your hat and you think, yeah, that's great, it fits me or it fits my wife or whatever,
Right.
Lovely and beautifully, and we love it, and there's no stress.
Right.
You know, everybody's happy because you've given them the hat. Nobody
Right.
minds, you know.
Right.
But when somebody's paying hard-earned money and you're not the cheapest hat maker on the block,
Yeah.
because there's these hats coming in from the Far East and so on, they've made
Yeah.
a conscious decision to buy into you as a hat maker, into your brand, into your product, and then it turns up and they're not happy with it. It's a stressful thing. Now,
Yeah.
fortunately, most of the people that I think you've had on here as hatters and elsewhere, very rarely does it happen, but it can
Yeah.
happen, especially in the early stages of you becoming a professional or semi-professional hatter.
Right. Right. And that, you reminded me of a great story I had about, kind of my first job in market research. Right. So, you know, we were a kind of a small boutique firm. Right. But we did kind of like really some high level market research. Right. Some really involved in-depth analysis and techniques that I kind of had to learn. Like some of it I didn't learn in graduate school. I had to kind of learn it and then become an expert because we were that small of a company. And so we had a lot of like federal government clientele, and we had one project. And again, at some point we grew to the point where we had a business development division, and they would work with me because I was the technical expert, right? And we had to have a kind of a synergy, right? Because remember, my time, they're paying for my time, and I have other things I have to get done. So the business development department, right? The person that headed that department had to kind of be in communication, know a little bit of what I know so they can go and generate proposals, right? Let's say a template. They'll generate a template and they will give it over to me to review. And I say, yep, for this job, we need to do this, you got it right. Or we need to add this and add this. And there was one time I remember really clearly where I was not consulted on the right, because it was a timeline, meaning, you know how a request for a proposal happens, and well, it's due today. We can't get a hold of Luke, right? For whatever reason, they submitted it. They felt confident that they could get the job done. Then, when it comes down to performing the job, I realized, hey, there's things that you did not budget for in this project, and then I had to go to my boss. Right, I went to my boss, right, because we're that small firm. You know, we were a pretty flat firm. So I went right to the CEO and I told him, I kind of knew where this was going, but I had to do that, and it wasn't to throw anybody under the bus, right? That wasn't the idea. The idea was, what do you want me to do? Meaning, two options, right? We perform what we spec'd out, and the client would probably never know the difference. The client would not know. They wouldn't have that level of expertise. They trust us to have that level of expertise. Or we swallow this, right? We say, Luke, do it. And we have to, we're not going to get paid for it. But the idea is, even if the client doesn't know it, we did them a solid. It was our fault. We're going to eat the cost, and we're going to produce a product that is that much better. And then maybe, just maybe, at the worlds will align and the universe will reward us, and we'll get repeat business from this client. And we did. So my boss, I knew he was going to say it, but I had to do it because it's not my call. My boss has to make that call. Boss, this is the situation. Regardless of what happened, what do we do? these are my two choices. He said, go do it. Do it. We're going to eat the cost and we're going to go move forward.
Good
I love that process. And it's business 101.
Yeah. Luke, I've looked at the time. I've got to rush to do something. So it's been really, really enjoyable having another chat. And
my pleasure.
Reach out. Let's have a chat on the phone again, because there's a couple of things I wanted to go through with you off air. Maybe for a Zoom call or something whenever you're free. And we'll pick up very soon. And Ian, lovely to see you again. I'll be with you, talking with you shortly. And Josh and Morgan, have a great day, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
Sounds good, Paul. Thank you so much, Paul. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Oh, well, ladies and gentlemen, Paul John Murphy. Again, he's an asset to this channel. And just wow, just a blessing. You know what I mean? Josh says, see ya. Man, what? And I should have probably told Paul I was going to close up, the stream pretty soon, only because, well, I think we got our money's worth here, right? You got your money's worth with this episode. And I got to thank, well, besides Paul, I got to thank Josh here for suggesting this topic, right? So, I mean, obviously we didn't have all the hatters here chimed in, but doesn't mean that we can't discuss this in a future stream. I think it's a really good question, right? And it tells me a lot about Josh, right? And what kind of person he is and how he's thinking about things. And it's one of those things like, hey, anytime, hey, you know what I mean? Like I said, I really love watching what you're doing, Josh. You are, like I said, you have, right? You come at it from an IT person, right? You already have a set of experience that you already had in your time as an IT person. You are, you're going to be just like Paul, right? And you don't have the same experience. You have an IT background, but it's going to be beneficial as you really start getting deeper and deeper and becoming the kind of hatter that you're trying to become. And I'm going to enjoy watching it, right? Because that's, again, I study work psychology, right? So I worked with military folks. I worked with nurses. I worked with public safety, right? With police officers and with firemen. I've also worked with HR professionals, right? And I actually was an HR professional. This is one of those things where I'm fascinated by the idea of work, right? And what work means and how to maximize, right? The idea of how to hire, how to attract the best candidates, how to hire the best ones, how to develop the ones that we actually hire, and how do we get them to where they want to go, right? All that is what I kind of formally have been trained in, and how I kind of live my life, because, right, it's kind of like I go dad mode, right, when I try to share what I know, but it's not meant so that I tell you what to do, right? All I am here is I'm trying to talk. It's the same thing, right? If you ask my son, if my son ever did come on my channel, you could ask him how I was. He'll probably have some colorful language to describe the way I am, because, it's a process, right? I'm 48-year-old Luke is a little different than, let's say, 28 or even 38-year-old Luke, for better or worse, right? Like I might have been, I was younger and also maybe a little bit less polished. So, unfortunately, my son Chris had to kind of deal with some of that. But, I think that given where he's at and how he's doing, I'm really proud of him. Just like I'm proud of all you guys, right? Morgan getting her own place, Josh really getting into the hatting, obviously Paul, and looking at his creations, right? Brian looking at his style, right? And how he goes about hatting, as well as Robert, in terms of, right? He brings such a altruism, right? In terms of his ability to share and want invest in other people to help them out. That's not lost on me, and I'm proud of all you guys, and I'm really happy that you're on. And obviously Ian as well. Can't forget my man Ian. Ian, hopefully everything's okay. Paul did mention that he hadn't seen you in a while, and and I noticed that as well. But hopefully everything's okay. Again, you don't need to talk about anything, in your personal life. But I really do hope all is well. We definitely miss you. We miss all you guys when you're not here. Doesn't mean you have to be here. Trust me. Life happens, right? And it's not lost on me. But yeah, basically wanted to kind of just reiterate, right? I scrolled Paul's information down there. Make sure you support Paul. Support Josh, right? These folks really need your, right? I mean, maybe they don't need it, right? Because I know they're both self-motivated. Robert, Brian, Paul, they're self-motivated folks. But it's always nice when you kind of get a little bit of like, hey, I like what you do, right? Like nobody's beyond that, right? Hey, that hat that you got that you're working on, I really like what you did with that hat. Do that stuff, and you will see the reaction. Nobody's ever gonna be, it's never gonna be lost on somebody when you do that. So as part of like the idea of being a good Luke's, right? Like, right? I did, my acronym, right? Like, love unites kin everywhere, right? That's what my interpretation of Luke is right now. And you can see that, right? I got my actual kin here yesterday. Shout out to you, Sam. Thank you. I appreciate. It was a pleasure actually being on camera with you. And just so you know, Dad loved it. So yeah. I got my man. Jonathan, my nephew, reached out. Shout out to you, Jonathan. I know you got some great ideas, and I want to help you. I want to do it with you. But we gotta get to the point, right? So it can't be like your uncle doing it all by himself. You need to kind of meet me halfway. That way we can get that in motion, and I'll be happy to do that with you. It might be actually even more fun than it sounds. So I'm down for that. Shout out to you, John. Shout out to Ethan. Shout out to all my nieces and nephews. Shout out to my son. It's been a pleasure, doing these live streams so far. I think we've been going on 4 months now. I think my math is mathing, right? Oh, no, maybe it's just 3 months, right? I think I started in August. Actually, it might have been today. It might have been my first stream, might have been August 4th, 2025. So I think I think my math is right? That's 3 months. Anyway, regardless, it's been a pleasure. Support the channel, right? If you get it, I think we're at 62 subscribers. Once we get to 100, I will go do a video on this hat and I will give it away, right? We'll work out the shipping situation, right? It's not like the best hat. It's got a little bit of moth bites, but you can see it's already been a few months, that I talked about this, right, still the same number of moth bites. So yeah, this might be a good first hat. It might be a good first hat restoration, or it might be your 100th hat, or it might be a hat that you give away to somebody else. Doesn't matter. I will get it to you or to the person that you want it to get it to. It's a 7 1/4. It's a Knox custom, not a traditional Knox custom. This is one that's made in Canada. I always forget the name of the company. It's like Stern Galt or something like that. It starts with an S, but it was licensed, right? And that's what I've been noticing a lot also in the forums, that, a lot of the products that I recognize from Hat Corporation of America, right, of which Knox was one, right, after HCA went under, those rights, or maybe while they were still on, right, maybe while they're still in their heyday, or at least on the decline, maybe on the decline, maybe not the heyday, but they were licensed. And I saw a gentleman, I believe his name was Zach, on Facebook, and he's been buying a lot of vintage hats. And he showed a hat from that was based. It was a Knox hat, but it was actually licensed to a company in Japan, a hat company in Japan. And I was like, wow, that definitely is not an HCA product, but it is Knox, which is an HCA brand. And I didn't need to know that, right? That's one of those things I love learning. So shout out to you, Zach, for teaching me that. I had no idea that, I knew about this hat, right, about HCA working with the Canadian hat company, but I didn't know that it made its way all the way to Japan. It's actually pretty smart, to be honest. Anyway, so support me, support Paul, support Josh, support Robert, Brian, and all the hatters, and also all just the people, right? Morgan, Ian, anybody that comes on this channel, please support them. But even if you don't, right? Even if you don't do that, right? Remember where am I going with this? Even if you choose not to support, right? The one thing you got to do without exception, stay hatting, my friend. Have a great day. Ciao, everybody. Bye.